Fred, thank you for coming to your interview.
Thank you for showing.
Well, I have a tape here, a virgin tape. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to the Fred Olan Ray show. We'll get to questions and answers very quickly.
Why are you recording this?
That's a good question. All right, I won't record it. All right, I'll make it up later. You challenged me to do that the other time. So, Fred, how'd you get into making moving pictures?
What? I was just telling them how we charge you $20 if you want to visit our sets. It's
No.
true, isn't it?
Well, I get it back if I don't ruin a take. Oh, he wanted me to verify it.
Absolutely.
I see.
Absolutely.
No, if I don't blow the take, I get it back. It's not like, what is it? It's like a marker. It's a $20 marker. Because, you know, my voice only will carry through 10-inch steel plate.
That's right. Ever since we started holding $20 on Brad, he's been very well behaved.
Well, that's a weekly income for me, so I have to be very careful.
That's it. It's 3 short stories, isn't it?
3 short stories. Ask Forey, he's an editor agent. Well, let's see. The first question, a serious question, Fred. People keep asking me about that picture from Little Miss Magic that appeared in the program book. Any update? Is that a finished film now?
It will be when I get home. I just keep trying to work on it between conventions right now. I just mixed it the other day. I tried to mix a whole movie in one day. I didn't quite make it. But I did get through 63 minutes of it. And Chuck Serino, who's the composer, said he would sit in on the rest of it. So tomorrow morning I'm leaving out of here, and I'll be back home about midnight Atlanta time tonight at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'll go down and look at the last 25 minutes of it, and if I like it, which it's already been print mastered, so if I don't like it, it's going to be a little bit of trouble. But if I do like it, it's already print mastered, and tomorrow afternoon I'm dropping in all the digital effects and doing the titles and putting all the images on the TV. And on Tuesday I'm color correcting. The scene-to-scene Da Vinci is how we're doing things now. Hopefully by Wednesday morning I can deliver it, because they're about to kill me because it's taken me so long to make that movie.
So, well, that sounds pretty finished to me. And you did the looping, right? You just did.
I did everything. I was mixing. I was completing the mix, and
One of our people left a punch.
they did too. So we saw it, and we didn't make sure it didn't go anywhere. We just went through it briefly, looking for ID, of course.
Let's see. Holy Grail, location of Conflict of the Body, Ed Kramer's home phone number.
I don't believe
his
it.
current phone number. The Kid, which was an unusual picture in as much as is that we didn't actually set out and make it as a real movie. It's a children's film. It was an offshoot of a sex picture that we were going to make and didn't make with Julie Strain called Seahawks. And what it was is we came back. I don't know why. We came back from India last year, and within a week or so we were given a script to shoot a submarine movie. And we went on the set of the submarine, and they were going to tear it down as soon as we finished. And so we were filming around the clock. Somebody else was filming Jeff Fahey movie during the day, and when they would wrap, I would go in, which was really hard for me because they had precedent over the set, and so they wouldn't release it until like 8 or 8:30. So I would start at 9 o'clock at night and have to be down at 6 a.m. so they could come back in at 7. And of course, I would put the set one way. And as soon as they'd come in the morning, they'd move everything around and take all my lights down and move them, even though we're both filming a submarine. So then I'd come in at night and I'd move all their stuff and tear it apart. And so it was a pretty hellish time. And I said, this is really rough. I think that we had one day with the cameras that we weren't going to use them. I said, I want that day on that set for me. And it's the kind of a deal I make a lot of the time. I want the equipment, the lights, I want the studio. And I would pay the crew, and I'd bring in my actors and all that sort of stuff myself. And I wanted to make a movie, because the beach is cheap. It's cheap to film at the beach. I wanted to make a movie called Seahawks, and I wanted Julie Strain, and she was going to be on a submarine at the beginning of the movie, and she was going to take out all these terrorists and then retire her naval commission and open an all-girl detective agency down at the beach. So this would be my opening sequence. Well, without getting into too much detail, the leading actor, after one night, became deathly ill. I mean, deathly ill. He went into cardiac arrest. He was in the hospital for 6 months. He almost didn't make it, but he did. Fortunately, he made it. But we had to scramble around and figure out what to do. So it was a SEAL team of 3 guys in the movie. So now we had to rewrite the script literally overnight and make it 2 guys. So now it's 2 guys, and the guy who played the second lead moved up to being the star of the picture. And so what happened was I had to refilm all the scenes. Now I filmed 2 nights with this guy. Even he came in sick the second night, but we filmed anyway. And so we had to do 2 days worth of work in 1 day. So my day of Seahawks on the submarine just kind of went by the by, and I didn't get it. I didn't get to shoot that day. So
This is Rapid Assault, right?
yes. So anyway, something happened. I don't know. I made so many films last year, I can't keep track. I was making some other film, which escapes me now. And I went back, and again I said, you know, I didn't get that day on the submarine. I want this equipment there was like a 4-day weekend or something. I said, and I want the equipment from this other movie. And they said, okay, fine. And so I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I thought, I saw Sabrina the Teenage Witch was on TV. And I said, well, you know, maybe I'll make a movie about a little girl who's a witch. And I'll shoot it mostly at my own house, and I'll just do it on the weekends when I have a little extra money here and there, which is why it took me so long to do it. But I did 4 days or 3 days, I don't remember how many I did, and I just kept shooting it on the weekends here and there and here and there. I think I finally got it done in 8 days. And I think the whole cost, and I spent about $10,000. It finally went up to about $11,500 on the digital effects to have the rays and things come out and people disappear. And I hired Russ Tamblyn, and I hired Tommy Kirk from the old Disney films. And Vanessa and Kim was in it, and Michelle Bauer was in it, and Ted Monty and a few other people that we knew from other films. Bob Quarry, Robert Quarry was in it. And we made this little film on the weekends, and I think our in the can cost came in about $45,000, and that included part of the processing and most of the editing. I think the total cost of the picture came in at $90,000. Somewhere right between there, though, we started in September and we just finished. Somewhere in October, November, a TV company came along and said, we'll buy this film from you for $75,000 for television in the U.S. only. We said fine, and they said, we'll pay you all the money now. So I said, okay, fine.
More fun.
And then we went overseas, and we did about $350,000 overseas, and we haven't sold the video in the U.S. yet, so it looks like the whole picture will probably come in probably at about $525,000 on about a $90,000 in 8 days of my time. So that's not too bad.
Since you made a previous family movie, Invisible Mom, is this the beginning of a trend? Are you going to do a whole line of family-type pictures? Fred Olan Ray films, not rated R?
Unfortunately, yes. Well, Invisible Mom it just came out on video here about a month ago with Dee Wallace Stone and Stella Stevens and John Ashley, amazingly enough, after all these years. And but it came out in Europe like a year ago, and it was a big hit in Italy. And it was like a #1 TV release there. So now the Italians have come and said, we want to put up the money for Fred to make some family film. So I made Invisible Dad. Roger didn't want to release the title to Invisible Mom. So I guess he changed his mind, because now we're doing Invisible Mom Part 2. That's this fall, and we're doing some Santa Claus movies. And you know, I hate children. And working with them is almost as bad as working with like a dog. Even my own dog let me down. No, Roxy. Well, they said, Fred, you might as well bring your own dog down, because she won't be any worse than a trained dog from a trainer. And so I brought her down, and she did do her normal thing, but you feel so bad, because now you're saying all I got to do is just to say, pat the thing, and she'll jump right up on the couch, right? So the kid Roxy jumps up on the couch, and Dee Wallace comes in and goes, what are you doing up there? Get down! And Roxy's like, I gotta get down. It was like the dog is like so confused. and we're all going, hey, she's doing great. She's doing everything you tell her to. What we learned is don't try to treat dogs with food to make them perform, because then they won't pay any attention to you at all. You can't do that. The biggest thing is bringing a dog on a set of 30 people and trying to get them to sit still or do something. And it's the same way it is with children. Don't feed kids treats for what they're doing. If you do, make sure they're low sugar snacks.
Right. A hungry kid is a better professional.
Kid on a sugar high is a maniac. And all the adults, if they don't want to say anything funny about the kid or whatever that is, so they're all sort of treating him with kid gloves, when what they really need is a good smacking, you know. Finally, an actor took this one kid aside and said, this is my close-up, you know, you will behave. And shut up, and you stand over there.
Well, talking about arduous working conditions, isn't the toughest movie you've ever made Inferno, the 9 weeks in India?
It was aptly named. Well, it was quite a treat to go to India. That we ever thought we looked forward to going is amazing to me, but we just didn't know what we were in for. And it's kind of like, I understand the Philippines is probably better than India. In fact, probably anywhere in the world is probably better than India. So I don't really know. There's no really good place to start. I mean, on a place like that, I mean, it's just a very poverty-stricken country with all kinds of problems and challenges for people who are used to having it fairly cushy in LA, and you know, having a bathroom to go to if you need it. And I think our first indication was when we got off the airplane in an international airport, and it only had like one bare bulb in it. I mean, it was like a dark warehouse. We're kind of looking for baggage claim, and we realized we were in it. And we went in the restroom, and you opened the stall. Well, there's no toilet in there. There was a hole in the ground made out of porcelain with 2 foot grips. And there's no toilet paper. There's a bundle of sticks. I'm not kidding. There's a bundle of sticks and a pitcher of water and a hole at ground level, and that was what represented a restroom facility in an international airport. And it was just that kind of thing. One day we were sitting, and we had nice hotels, and we were having lunch, and we looked out, and I saw these 2 squirrels chasing each other out on the lawn, and they're like going, and one's going, and one's going, and then they stopped, and I realized they were lizards. They were like huge squirrel-sized lizards, and they were everywhere. They were called bloodsuckers. And there were bats everywhere. Bats zooming down the halls of a 5-star hotel. You know, you just all of that. And they have everything was just dirty and run down. After the British left, nobody built anything new. And the only thing they had were these temples that were just gorgeous. They were just immaculately painted, beautiful temples, and they were everywhere. Just even some of them were no bigger than a standard mailbox that you see out on the street corner, and they all had this little elephant-headed guy in it named Ganesh. And there'd be fruit and incense burning. I'm talking about like in a video lab. You go in a high-tech video lab, there'd be this god there with fruit offerings and sacrifices in front of him. And I said, well, what makes this the god of good luck? And they said, well, it's an ancient story about a man who came home and found his wife in bed with another guy. Well, thinking second and acting first, he cut the guy's head off. Then he realized that it was his own son, and the mother was only comforting him. So he ran out and he cut the head off of the first animal he saw, which was an elephant, and he sewed it on his son's body to save his life. And again I asked, so how does that make him the god of good luck?
That may explain all the good luck you had in India.
That might have been it. Well, I spent most of my time looking for little carvings of Kali to bring my friends back home. It's not a very popular god, but they do have them. And I think I brought you one.
Yeah, I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah.
It was made of camel bone, right? Because of the ivory problem?
Yes, yeah, the ivory gets you in jail there. Not having it there, trying to bring it home, so they make things out of camel bones, which probably explains why we never saw any camels in India. And we never saw any lambs or sheep either. It turned out the mutton they were serving was goat. And we saw plenty of goats. And they're all eating garbage. Everything was garbage there. I mean, if people were building a building, they didn't have scaffolds. They had like bamboo tied with rope, like in a Tarzan movie. And it'd be going up, and they'd be painting billboards off of basically things made out of sticks.
Didn't you say one advantage of India was the Indian stuntmen were really daring and almost, crazy compared to normal stuntmen?
Yeah, they were fearless. I mean, they do anything. They wouldn't do a high fall without pads. They'd throw a couple burlap bags full of straw on the ground to fall on. But mostly you could hit them, and they would flip up in the air without any kind of a tramp and no pad on their back, and they'd land right on a flat concrete floor and get up and go, no pads. Because when we first met them, we were concerned that they were so small. And Don Wilson, Don Dragon, is 6 foot tall, and he's looking at these guys, and they're all about 5'4", and he said, well, what kind of movie is this going to be? I'm beating up on a bunch of little guys. So they were all disgusted, and they were going to leave, and the Indian guys got a little indignant, and they came up and they said, please, we'd like to show you what the guys can do. I said, Don, we've driven all the way out here. I mean, we drove an hour and a half out in the middle of nowhere where they were filming this Indian movie through these crocodiles were laying on the side of the road and all this weird stuff was going on. I said, we might as well go see what they can do. So they go over, and nobody spoke English. 1 or 2 people would speak English, and they set the guy up, and they said, what's this? And they just threw a punch, and the guy went up, boom, and hit the ground. We all looked at each other and went, whoa, that's pretty good. And then another guy come up and they took him by the foot and they threw his foot in the air. Up he went, really high, and hit. And I said, well, you know what this means? I mean, you could throw that kick and you could show this guy from head to toe, no cutting. And so we line them up. 2 guys in a row. Don would just go wham, and 2 guys would go up and hit the ground. It was great. We'd say, you know, he's coming down the flight of stairs. Can he hit you and go over the side? Sure. Go to do the shot. Well, there's no paddle. He don't need no pad. Go down the stairs. Don hits him. Over the guy goes. Twice.
Didn't you have a problem in terms of the Indian crew when you wanted to shoot in temples or the temple set?
Well, it's a very religious country, and you're supposed to take your shoes off when you go into temple. And I had to go look at some temple ruins, and it's not really the kind of place you want to walk around with your shoes off. Any place in India. I mean, people were being electrocuted all the time because the power lines are under the ground and they're not insulated. And they had 55 people killed in a rainstorm because they stepped on live power line while walking alongside of the road. And I mean, I'm wearing socks and stuff. So after that, I said, well, I don't want to go any more real temples. I ain't going in there. So we found a movie set. There was a back lot with a little town in it. It was a set. The whole thing was a set. And it had a temple set. So I said, great. So I go in there. And they're like, oh, you got to take your shoes off. And I said, I'm not taking my shoes off. This is a set. It's in a temple. I said, if we have a police station set. I said, you really feel like you're in jail? Well, no. I said, we're in a bar set. You think you can get a drink? No. I said, well, this is a temple set. It's not a temple. Oh, you're right. So please go right on in. So I go in and I'm working with these guys and I'm looking at them. They're all just sliding out of their shoes. coming in there. And so I used it in the film. That's the way I tied up the Indian cop. Don runs in to get the bad guys, and the Indian guy, they stop him and tell him to take off his shoes. So, oh, he's got to stop. And they didn't like him making fun of them. They did this thing. They did this thing with their head. It was like this. And whatever you asked them, this was a universal. And if they thought you were thinking they were an idiot, they'd roll their eyes and do it. And I was saying this one guy, almost on our first day, second day there, I said, I'll need this, and I would like to see this, and as soon as we can get over here, and the guy's just doing this, his head's like it's going to come off. And I said, excuse me. I said, does this mean yes, or does this mean no? He said, this means no problem. And they're all doing it. They're all doing it. Yes, no, yes. That Taylor that came over to see something, his head never stopped.
Yeah, that country would be spastic in, because people would...
Well, some of them were, the more highly educated people were like from Bombay, some of the actors that spoke good English, and I would say, you know, why don't you just say yes or no? I mean, why are you doing that? I said, well, I'm not doing that. I said, well, yes, you are. And he's like, no, I'm not. I wanted a scene where Don would just stop. Don't do that.
Well, anyway, this might be a good time to throw it open to questions. I'm sure everybody wants to ask Fred stuff.
I know that the Indian film industry is extremely big, and they have like enormously elaborate productions with singing, dancing, every possible film genre all has that stuff. Were you able to piggyback on the back of that, or did you go places where even they didn't go and film?
Well, we actually visited a couple Indian film sets. And I mean, this is it's just hard to believe this kind of place, because if you went right off the main road, they were little dirt paths that went and made gigantic neighborhoods. All little dirt roads and little doorways that were like half doors would be businesses. It was like a whole other city within cities. And we were down in some place, I don't know, we got lost. We were looking for a hairdryer. That's what we were out looking for, a hairdryer with our driver. And he was taking us on Sunday or Saturday, nothing's open. And he was trying to find a place open on Sunday where we could buy a hairdryer. So we were down in one of these little places, and I saw this poster. It was for an Indian movie, but it was starring WWF wrestlers, The Undertaker. So my son was a wrestling fan, so I said, look, I want to get out and take a picture of this poster. It was made in Canada. It was an Indian film made in Canada, where an Indian kid goes and he's fighting like in a cage, like in these like kickboxer, illegal movies to the death, and he was fighting wrestlers. I said, boy, nobody in the rest of the world knows this film exists. And so I get out, I take a picture, and I look over, and I see in this little dirty corner, CinemaScope Lens Repair Shop. And it was down this little dirty path. Everything there is shot in scope. They only have 3 lights, and it takes them hours because no one there will shut up. They don't record sound. So while they're acting, there's a guy sawing, another guy's hammering. Right next to them, they've got open spaces. Crows live in the studios, and they're cawing and flying around through the shots. And And all this, all the things the lights are on are made out of bamboo and tied together with rope. But they shoot it in scope. And they take 6, 7 months to make a movie. And the actors will work on one movie one day, and another movie another day. And I suspected that our crew was going somewhere at night because they would only work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they would sleep most of that time. They were asleep. I used to call it the Valley of the Sleeping Men. It looked like a Civil War battlefield after lunch. I mean, the bodies were everywhere. So finally, I bought a slingshot from the side of the road, and I started shooting them in the ass.
Really?
Got to get up on the balcony. I was using dust balls. I took little plastic paintballs with me because you couldn't get guns or stuff into India. So I took these little paintballs and I filled them up with like powder and plaster so that when somebody fired a gun, you could get a little dust hit off the wall. And I finally, and all through the film, they couldn't find me a slingshot. So I kept no dust hits, no dust hits. Finally, it's like almost the last day, the guy, I said, are you telling me you never could find a slingshot? I saw an old lady sitting on the side of the road selling them on the way up here today. And the guy said, oh, we have a slingshot for you. And he finally gives me the slingshot. And I said, well, how come you didn't give this to me before? He said, we were too embarrassed to tell you that we couldn't figure out how the two little plastic ball halves went together. So in the one last scene in the movie where they're shooting or something, you'll see some dust ball hits, but I spent most of them, I just shoot the sleeping people with them.
It sounds like it's a high-tech jungle out there.
I'll turn this off.
Well, is there another question?
It's driving me insane.
I know.
You have to talk loud to be heard over the music.
In India, you can use they don't use real weapons in the movie.
You couldn't find a real gun. Most of the guns were hand carved out of wood. And they didn't look anything like a real gun. I said, I can't get, you can't get close enough to this. I needed and these guys were supposed to be Interpol agents. I said, they need automatic weapons and pistols and stuff. So finally, after 3 different places, they flew some guys in, well, they don't fly them, and they put them on a train from Bombay. And these guys came in, they had a couple decent looking guns, but it took them forever to do anything. Everything is owned jointly there. Every light is owned by a family, and so 5 people would come and hold that light, because that was their livelihood, was that one light. And they didn't have plugs on the end of the wires. They had 2 bare wires. They'd stick them in the socket, then they'd jam them in with a screwdriver, then they'd take 2 sticks off the ground and put those in to make sure the wires didn't come off. When it started raining, they all ran like hell. Shit was exploding and catching on fire. We had a couple of fires, and then they would say, we have to stop, we can't keep filming. Why? Well, there's rain and everything, water's and everything, and then it's all going to explode. And of course, there'd be no trailer or umbrella or anything, and we would just sit in the rain 6 nights in a row. All our exterior nights were raining. Every single night at 10 o'clock, like clockwork, it would start raining. And they had no bars or discos, and these are all things that were in our script. Palaces, mansions, all these things did not exist in Madras. But liquor could be had on any street corner. Every street corner sold booze. And there was this stuff we got to like, but mostly it was awful. They had stuff called Old Cask, and it was like black coffee like rum, but it was actually pretty good. It's 35 rupees a bottle, which is $1. So everybody had one of these in their back pocket. And we were at a place called VGP, which we call Buddha Land. It was like the equivalent of an amusement park. And we were filming a waterfall. There was like a temple ruin, and there was a waterfall there that we got running finally, and some other weird things. And it turns out that at night, people lived in the park. They lived in the drainage tunnels. And at night, when the park closed, all these people, like zombies, would start coming out from the drainage tunnels, Like maybe 100 people lived in this park after hours. And it started raining on us. And we didn't, there's nowhere to go, so we ran under this big elephant thing. And we're underneath there, and we're drinking the Old Cask, and the rain's coming down. And the water starts running down the elephant's stomach and collecting and then dripping on us like he was peeing, And it was just, there was like no way around this. So we finally saw a straw hut. And we ran over there and got in there. It was full of Indians. People, it was just their eyes. They were very, very dark-skinned there. And these were people who were living in the park, and then they kept staring at us because there were no white people in Madras except us. And finally, when it let up, they all ran, and we were thinking we should be running too. And it just, every night was the same story. No umbrellas, no motorhomes, no bathrooms, no anything, nowhere to go.
How'd you get your doctor? How'd you get your doctor to come in to give you the shot so you could finish the film? I remember you told me You had to have a doctor.
Well, we weren't that sick because we read up a lot on this, but we still were feeling pretty poorly. We finally found a place called Shakey's Pizza, no relation to a real Shakey's Pizza. And it was really good, but it was, I don't know what it was, but at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was really sick. So we finally called him, the doctor. It turned out the producer of the film was also a doctor. And we said, if you don't get somebody over here pretty quick, I'm not going to be there tomorrow. And Don Wilson was always getting sick, and I said, if Don or I miss a day, you're going to be in trouble. So 5 doctors or 5 people came into our room at 2 a.m. in the morning and gave me something. And I managed to get there the next day. I never missed a day, although a lot of people, one girl was actually hospitalized for 5 days. And she wanted, I said, look, I can't film around you anymore. I'm going to take Jillian Kesner, who was with us, who was in the movie Firecracker. She had long blonde hair, and I said, I'm going to just shoot Jillian from the back and double you, and maybe I can pick up a close-up later to cut in there. And the girl said, no, 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 I don't want to be doubled. Come get me when you need me at the hospital. So it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. I said, send the car to the hospital, which was like an hour away. They went, they disconnected her IV, put her in the car, drove her to the set. I had her hold her hand behind her back and shoot the gun with the other hand. I did like 5 shots of her. They took her back to the hospital, re-hooked up the IV, and back in the bed. She's a real trooper, though.
What was the background of this film? Who produced it? Well, why did you have to go to hell to film it?
Well, apparently what we discovered as we went through is that there was a lot more to doing this than met the eye. Initially, I was asked to do two movies that I didn't really want to do. And they said, if you do these 2 movies, we'll give you a contract for a better film. I said, well, okay. So then I do the 2 films, and I get this call. The producers were Ashok Amitraj, who did the Double Impact film with Van Damme and does a lot of films, and Andrew Stevens, who was Ashok's partner, was an actor, did Night Eyes, and is Stella Stevens' son. So they came over and they said, we got your big movie. So what is it? It was Inferno. And it's going to film in India. I said, India? And I thought, well, the whole deal here is that if I said no, then they had filled out their obligation. They didn't owe me a bigger picture if I turned the film down. So what happened apparently is there's a bigger film that was made there by the same group called Jungle Boy, based on the Kipling thing, and it should be coming out sometime soon. When you see that film is the reason Inferno was filmed in India. They made this movie, and they've got animatronic and computer-generated talking animals that are truly amazing. Robert Quarry did the elephant. Ross Hagen, if any of you know him, he did Gorilla or whatever it was. But it was a movie made in Bangalore, which we understood was a pretty decent place compared to Madras. And what happened was, I think the producers may have lifted maybe 30 grand somewhere along the line and got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, but they'd already spent the money. So they said, well, we'll fund half of a movie for you to make another film. We'll make this up to you. And Ashok said, well, this time we'll film it in Madras, because Ashok had a company in Madras, television company, and so they wanted to go there. And the Indians would put up $500,000, and the Americans would put up $500,000, of which half of the American money was probably from Roger Corman, who was the executive producer above Andrew and Ashok. And so that's how it kind of worked out. But we were there a long time, about a little over 2 months, living there.
Fred, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the most viewed Fred Olan Ray movie at this point? Of the 70-some movies you've made, what is the one Fred picture most people have seen?
I would probably say Dinosaur Island, because it was the 2nd most requested movie on Showtime. And so it played for 3 years and would run 3-4 times a week. So I'm guessing that that might be it. I mean, I know you want me to say Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
No, I should say 60-foot centerfold.
I don't think anybody saw Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold. I think that one just breezed right through town. Should have had Daryl Hannah in it.
Seems to stay on cable about 2 years. But yeah, Dinosaur Island, you're right. There was a period there where you couldn't escape Dinosaur Island on late night cable. Are you happy with it?
Well, I mean, for what it was a 10-day movie. It was done very, very cheaply. We had a good time with it. I think it's a movie that always, every scene leads to something happening, which is the way I feel about Inferno and some of the other films we've been making, is that each scene leads to action. Keeps you headed toward action. There's very few little meandering scenes where people start talking just to make the picture run a little longer. And I mean, if you want to see that type of movie, which I always did as a kid. Because you watch these movies and like you see a 50-foot woman, you keep wondering, well, gee, what did she do for clothes until they found those giant bed sheets? And those cave girls are always fighting and they never lose any clothing or they're running around. I said, you know, in our films, everything that you wanted to see out of a Hammer film in the 60s and you didn't get it, we'll give it to you. You'll get it. You'll get it out of one of those films. We live up to people's low expectations.
Live down, live down. Now, isn't it true that some of the Fred classics are now available on laser discs for the true collectors?
Well, they've always been, most of them have always been available on laser. The only one that we actually saw fit to put out ourselves was Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, and we went 3 pressings on that. We kept selling out. So that was pretty good. It sold as many copies as the House of Usher Pit and the Pendulum double disc that they brought out of Corman's films, at almost the same price. So I was very happy about that. And it's what's nice about owning your own films, and I do own about, I don't even know how many, but I probably own 10 or 12 of the films that I've made, is they continually bring in revenue every year. Somebody licenses something. I mean, there was a time where we would make 6-day pictures. We were making 6- and 5-day movies. And I just got very burned out by it, and I just wanted to I wanted somebody else to pay me. So I said, well, I'm not going to work until somebody gives me what I want. So I sat for about almost a year and didn't do anything, but with all these pictures in the loop, they were always generating income, and you know, you really, if you don't mind, you know, living on 40 or 50,000 a year, these pictures will generate a certain amount of income, and you can just kind of cruise around until somebody comes up and gives you the deal you want, which I did get on a movie called Mind Twister. That's what broke my fast of not working.
Who brought out the 60-foot laser disc? That sounds funny.
That's
Let me rephrase
Image.
that.
Image brings up almost all the discs, don't they? I mean, there aren't too many laser disc places, and they had us do a commentary. And that was another situation where you have to really be clever. And I'm always, you know, as much as I say I want to sit down and not do anything for a while, if you just dangle something in front of me, I'll go for it. And we were making a movie called Sorceress with Linda Blair and Edward Albert Jr. and Julie Strain, people like that. And we had just shown Roger Dinosaur Island. And I mentioned to Roger that I had an idea for a movie called The Incredible 30-Foot Centerfold. And Roger said that he had developed the 50-Foot Woman campaign and it belonged to him, or it was PD movie or something, but he'd always wanted to do a remake of that film. And it just so happened we were there. And he wasn't really crazy about the Dinosaur Island special effects, so he wanted me to show him how I would accomplish these effects on my own nickel. So we had the cameras from the Sorceress, and I went out on a weekend to the parking lot of the building we had, and I got Michelle Bauer to come down because I knew she would do it for free. And we put some kind of a towel on her, or I don't know, something. She made her own costume, that's right. It was made out of bed sheets, I think. And we just literally took the camera cases. I had an idea of how I wanted to do a hardline matte shot, and I put the camera cases down with a board. So I raised her up to the point where I thought her feet would be if she was standing back on the sidewalk near the road. And then I parked a bunch of cars behind her, and I lined the whole thing up, and I shot her where she comes out and turns around and looks at the building, which had a balcony on it. And I just shot her right in front of the building. She just walked the board, turned and did the thing, and I unplugged the camera at the battery, so I didn't touch it. So I pulled the board and the camera cases out and left everything it was, brought Michelle out of the shot, just took everything out of the shot, and I put some guys up on the balcony and a couple guys in a pickup truck, and I rolled it for about, I don't know, 15 seconds, and then I told them to jump out, and they jumped out and looked up and ran off, and one guy came out and said, "Oh my God, look at the size of those tits." And I filmed that, and I took the two elements were exactly the same, except for the differences. So then we went into a digital place, and we cut the side of the building along the top of the cars, and it put Michelle behind the building. So we just pasted it on top of the other picture. So now she came out from behind the building, her feet walked behind the cars, and people jumped up and ran, and she turned and looked at them, and they actually took her image, flipped it over, and put it in the reflection of the windows on the second story of the building. Well, I took that and showed it to Roger. He wanted to see it about 3 or 4 times. And he said, "Let's go to my office and we'll make the deal." And he didn't want her to play the part, so I spent $2,000 doing that shot. And I did a little blue screen shot in my living room as well, with some roll of blue paper that I bought at a photo shop. And it cost me about $2 grand. There was no way I could recover my money. I did put the test on the end of the laser disc, and I used it in a movie called Bikini Drive-In. And it's one of the movies on the screen in Bikini Drive-In, a movie that Forey was in. I thought I almost was going to kill him in that. I wanted one of those, when I was a kid, they had those coils, pick they called them, and they were supposed to get the mosquitoes. I don't know if they were supposed to kill them or make them leave your car, but if you rolled your windows up like I did and burned them, well, they couldn't get out anyway, and it always left this brown sticky mass on my father's windshield. And somebody had given me a pick at some convention, some person there. So I still had it, and I said, I want to do a thing on pick right for you, and there was a woman there lighting the pick in the car with the windows rolled up, and I had the fogger behind him. And he's lighting it, and they tell him not to do it, it's expired, it's from 1965, and he said, well, we'll just have to take a chance. And he lights it, and the whole car, just till and they're just sitting there, and the cloud is gathering too, you can't see them. Finally, I told you, don't get out of the car until I cue you, because I was waiting for it to fill up. And they're sitting there looking around. It looked pretty dangerous. Finally, I cued them, and they opened the doors, and man, this stuff just came out of there. It's incredible.
Well, I was just going to ask you, you never let anything go to waste, right? That's why you use the footage in Bikini Drive-In of Michelle Bauer's test footage. It's like with the passage of time, have you ever had anything you haven't finally been able to use? I know you had the John Carradine footage that ended up finally as the basis of Jacko, along with the camera on Mitchell. I mean, you use everything eventually.
Well, we've got some stuff laying around. We did a thing with Forey and Bobby Brazil and them years ago called Beach Blanket Bloodbath, based on a treatment that we paid Ed Wood Jr. to write. We never got the script. I'm working on it, he kept saying. My typewriter's broken, he said. And, then we sent him a Christmas card one year, and it turned out he was dead. So anyway, we made about 5-6 minutes worth of that on the Star Slammer sets. I like to use sets before I tear them down. Sometimes I'll make a whole movie because I've got a set standing that I thought would be pretty cool. And we've got some stuff of Olan Ray. Well, we were making a movie for the Playboy Channel last year called Nightshade. It was about vampires. It was a vampire strip bar movie. And I needed some room for a private detective's office, and I was looking at a studio that had a bar, and I was going to build a stage and make the whole strip bar in the studio to save myself some money. And I said, do you have any other studio space that I could use, because I need an office? The guy said, well, you could look at the stage next door and see what's over there. So they let us in over next door, and I went in, and what it was a spaceship. From top to bottom, the entire, every inch, even the bathroom doors had been made over to look like spaceship doors, and it was 2 levels with a white lab in the middle and a cockpit over here, and then they had ladders going up and catwalks. The whole thing was a spaceship. So I ran right out of there. And I called Roger, and I wanted to make the Terror Within 3. I said, this place could be an underground lab. And I said, we don't want the financing. We'll come up with the money. We want the title and the rights to the elements, and you buy the U.S. home video and TV from me, and I'll have the foreign. Well, they just kept making us go through this stuff. They wanted us to videotape the set, and da-da-da-da-da-da. We didn't want to tell them where it was, because we didn't trust them. And so finally, I just said, oh, to hell with it. I've had enough of this. So Roger had stolen one of my titles. I made a movie, and I recut it, and I called it The Alien Within. It played on TV, and it was out on video. And then Roger takes a movie called Unknown Origin with Roddy McDowell. He calls it Alien Within for his Showtime thing. And I thought, well, I'll show him. I'll call this Alien Within 2. And if he has any success at all, I'll ride right on his coattails. I dare him to say anything to me. So I called it Alien Within 2 just to piss him off. And I called a guy who wrote scripts very quickly, and I said, I want this movie, and I did the same film I would have made, only I didn't call it Terror Within 3. I called it Alien Within 2. And years ago, as you said, I was doing a movie called Bulletproof with Gary Busey. And I did the trailer, and I rented that Damnation Alley tank. And I drove it around the desert for just the trailer. I mean, I had a skull out there, and in the slow motion, the wheels would go over, and the human skull exploded, and I had it going over the camera. And the part of the deal was I would keep this negative. Well, this was 1987 or 86. I still had the negative, and I knew right where it was. And so I transferred it, took the spaceship cockpit this guy had, and made it look like the inside of that thing. Then I got footage that's like over 10 years old. And then you cut to the people inside, and they're driving. Only thing I couldn't show was them getting out. That was rough, so we just... And they go to a lab, and we build a monster, and we made this picture. Again, we shot 3-4 days. Nightshade ended on a Wednesday. I took a Thursday off, and I started this on Friday morning. I went Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think I took a couple weeks off and I came back and I finished it. I think the whole film took me 7 days to make. And I think I spent about 75 grand. I did a couple hardline mats to put the laboratory out in the desert. I had a model built, a miniature. And I shot that with a Mitchell 35 pin registered camera. And we rented the from, what was that show we got this? The spacesuits came from, they were armor plated spacesuits, and they came from maybe Deep Space Nine. I don't know what they were, but they were armor plated sort of like gear. And we made a deal with a guy for $1,000. He supplied 5 outfits or 4 or 5 outfits to the actors, and they wore these costumes. And we had a monster made, a creature suit made, and the whole thing looked really nice. We put JJ in it, and Brink was in it, and John Barrymore, the third, and some of our other friends.
When did it become hybrid? I know it went through a bunch of different title changes.
Well, you know what? It became hybrid after the very first weekend. I just, you know, that caused some confusion later when I went to online the damn thing, because some of the tapes said Alien Within 2, and some of them said hybrid on them. Yeah. But I don't even know why I called it hybrid. And I said to the guy in the script, I said, make sure, because I would like maybe only have a guy write enough pages for me to get through the weekend. Because I didn't have enough time. I'd be doing these things so fast, I didn't have enough time to write the whole script. We'd write the whole script later. Just give me the stuff to get through now. And later I said, well, make sure that they say it's a hybrid somewhere in the movie, so I can use that title. It's like we made Biohazard. We said, well, this movie's, there's nothing biohazardous about this film. So I said, well, make sure one of the characters say, hey, don't touch that thing, biohazard. Well, it justified the...
I meant to bring some copies of the Femme Fatales where I did the article on hybrid, but I forgot to bring them. But I do have Fred's book, Weird Menace, at the end of the thing, if anybody wants a wonderful Fred collectible.
Hybrid's
Yes.
coming out next month on video also.
Oh, yeah.
I made
Yes.
a terrible deal. The video market's awful right now.
Do you work with a permanent team at all, or?
Kind of, if I can. I mean, it's a freelancer's business. And I try to keep all the people that I like. Yeah, I try to keep the same DP, and I try to keep the same editors. You have to say DPs, because you've got to have at least 3 or 4. And editors, you have to have a little bit of a talent pool to pull from, because not everybody's always going to be available.
What about the paperwork? Do you have an accountant or lawyer? It sounds like you've got scads of this and that coming in and out, as I heard your talk yesterday.
Well, we've got a UPM, which is your line producer, your unit production manager, and you generally try to, if you can, keep the same person or a couple people that you like, who you know and trust. Those are the people who basically hire the crews, and they do the paperwork for the locations and the equipment and the insurance and all of that. I mean, really, that's the person who makes your show. That and your coordinator and your ADs and stuff. They make sure that everything kind of runs fairly smoothly. And then at a certain level of problem, then I would be asked, or Andrew, or somebody would be asked to step in at a point where a decision that's beyond somebody's position needs to be made.
I was thinking about something you did 10, 12 years ago. You want to know...
Well, the films that I own, that's what our company, American Independent, that's what we do. We police our past films, and we handle the distribution of videos and some books and things like that. But that's Mark McGee, who you may know as a McFarlane writer, who did the Fast and Furious, History of American International, and a lot of McFarlane books. He's my assistant. And between the two of us, we police our contracts, and we're always looking for films that have expired and come back to us. Like, almost everything is starting to come back to us now. Even New World Pictures, who bought a film from us, their video window has finally elapsed. They're 7 years, so now that's come back to me. But it's already been on video and it's been on laser, so what'll I do with it? They still have TV. Well, if DVD catches on all my old films that are coming back to me, I own the DVD rights. I own laser rights now too, but who cares? I can go sell through. I can go sell through the $10 tapes, and I can go DVD. And films like Phantom Empire and Biohazard 2, films that didn't go to laser, and Hybrid, I held back the laser rights on Hybrid, and I own television on that. I own TV and video on Witch Academy. I own everything now on that. That's completely come back to me. Phantom Empire, everything's come back on that. Evil Tunes has returned to me. Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers has come back to me after I relicensed both of those to Showtime again, and USA. And, you know, just these films will just, as long as there's some kind of market for them, you can keep relicensing them and making money on them. Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, I mean, amazingly enough, made about $25,000 last year. And I mean, that's an old movie. I mean, I think I shot it for $25,000. So well, that wasn't too bad.
By the way, you mentioned Mark McGee. I noticed a fan here with a copy of Photon magazine. If any of you remember, I know Forey does. That was and I know Fred and I have our collections. It was a great old film fanzine, and Mark McGee used to be one of its best writers.
So was Jim Wynorski when his name was Wojnarowski.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your book, you mentioned you made 2 movies called Angel Eyes and Little Devil, but I've never seen them anywhere.
Little Devils is on USA Up All Night as Witch Academy. Okay? That's been out there. It's been out there for 3.5 years, and my contract on that is about to elapse. I may bring that out on Laserdisc or sell through video. That was with Robert Vaughn and Priscilla Barnes. Angel Eyes was a movie we produced and put the money up for, and Gary Graver wrote it and directed it. And it's really a remake of a nudie that he made years ago called Little Girl Who Lived Down the Lane or something. And it had Eric Estrada and John Phil Blanc and Monique Gabrielle. That came out on video. We made a deal with a company called Amazing Movies, and I've been eternally sorry that I did that. And it never came out on laser. Atlantic, who brought out the video, I think went out of business, so I'm kind of wondering, we actually, this is something we're actually been working on lately, because television for that kind of movie is hot right now. But I can't sell the TV until the rights expire with Amazing Movies. Their right to handle the deal. So what I'm thinking about doing is sending a letter to a company I know doesn't exist anymore and giving them 10 days to report to me, because they're supposed to report to me quarterly. Now I haven't gotten anything in years. So I said, you know, I was going to send them a letter saying, you're in violation of my contract. If you don't respond within 10 days with back reports, da-da-da-da-da-da, I have no choice but to rescind your contract and your rights. Send it to them registered, and if it just comes back like I know it will, then I'll trot right down to my laser manufacturer and put it out on Laserdisc. And I'm just waiting patiently for my rights to my contract to run out of Amazing so I can put it out on television.
Now, people might like to see the footage of Beach Blanket Bloodbath. You can see it on the documentary Look Back in Angora, right?
There's a little bit of it on there, yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so, you know, sometimes the Fred Completist, Look Back in Angora, there's about a minute. And Forey, you're quite recognizable in the clip.
Well, Betsy's glad to hear that.
You also did produce the movie Sex Bomb, which never seemed to...
I had very little, every once in a while, people will come up to me, and it used to be very common until I just started saying no thank you. People would want to come up and take you to lunch and ask you a bunch of questions. They wanted to make a movie. I wouldn't mind giving people advice, except that no one ever made the film. They simply wasted my time. They never went out and then made the movie. So I just started saying, unless they were a really good friend of mine, if they were a friend of a friend, I'd say, no, I just can't do this. But people would come up and they'd say, well, we'll give you this amount of money, or we'll give you a percentage of ownership in our film if you're just there on the telephone to tell us what we need to know when we get into a problem. And so occasionally, like Jeff Broadstreet, who made that, was a friend of George Edwards, who produced Queen of Blood and Frogs and stuff, and George was a friend of mine and we used to share an office, so I said I would do this for Jeff. Well, I never heard from Jeff again. And he called me one day and he said he wanted to show me the film. So I went down and saw the film, and he said, what'd you think? I said, I think you didn't call me enough, Jeff. It was funny in spots. Robert Quarry was imitating Sam Arkoff, and when Bob Quarry died in the middle of the movie was over at that point. Delia Shepard was quite a find, who was in that. Linnea was just kind of in it, and it was okay, but they did some very bad business, and that's where I could have helped them. They made a very, very, very bad business deal. In fact, we rescued some of our negatives from a vault the other day that had gone out of business and had a for lease sign on it. I finally threatened them with legal action if they didn't give me my materials back. It's been 2 years I've been trying politely to get my films out of there. So finally they said for $50 they'll let me in. So I met them at 6 o'clock at night. It was Mark and Wynorski and me. We were going to tote this stuff out of there. And we went in there, and there was Sex Bomb just catching dust, sitting on the shelf. And I looked down. There were the negatives for Not of This Earth, Attack of the Crab Monsters, and War of the Satellites. Over here was Dinosaurs and King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Jesus.
And I mean, just everywhere. And a 35mm fine-grained comp of Beast of Yucca Flats.
George Johnson.
I wanted to walk out with all of it. Fortunately, I only took my own films. But I saw a negative there from Amazing Movies, the people who didn't do me right on Angel Eyes, and it was for a film I made called Alienated, that they had bought flat outright from me, and I didn't own one nickel of it. They said, hey, here's one with your name on it. Do you want this? I said, put it in the back of my car. I drove away. Not only with that, I drove away with Mob Boss that I did for Trimark. But I'll give it back to them eventually. once they miss it. Well, we made this movie Alienator. Let me tell you this very quickly because it has a very funny ending. We made this movie. I wanted to remake The Astounding She-Monster. And a friend of mine from Arkansas named Jeff Hogue, who had bought some Herschel Lewis films and stuff, he wanted to be a movie producer. So Jeff was having a hard time. His wife left him when he was in the hospital for depression. And so he came and he was staying on my couch. And he said, he has from Arkansas, he says, you know, you and me need to make a movie. And I said, well, I have this script. It's a remake of The Astounding She-Monster. It's called The Huntress. And Jeff said, well, let's do this, because he didn't want to develop anything else. But he wanted to call it Alienator, which has now become a term. I see it on comic books and everything else. This was years ago. So we make this movie, make it in 6 nights, and it's got Leo Gordon and John Philip Law in it. And we make this little movie, and it all happens out in the woods. And this bodybuilder girl's running around with Sapporo beer bottles on her breasts, and she's shooting them with a ray gun. And we show it to a company called Heritage, Skip Steloff. And Skip likes it, and he wants to buy it, but he wants it to have another name in it. And I said, well, you know, every time you go and try to monkey with something that's already been structured a certain way, you can only screw it up further. And I finally thought, well, we never saw the planet that these guys came from. It was like a planetary cop chasing an escaped alien crook, years before everybody else started doing that. So we decided, well, we'd show the jailbreak on the other planet, and Jan Michael Vincent. They wanted Jan Michael Vincent, and we hired P.J. Souls and Robert Clark from the original She-Monster. So we went to a water treatment plant, which kind of looked like outer space to me. And we had a big jailbreak, da-da-da-da-da. We spent $100,000, $125,000 to make the first movie, the first part of it with John Philip Law. We spent another $100,000 for 3 more days to put Jan Michael Vincent in the film. So we make this movie, and it goes through 3 different scores and composers. We finally finish it, and I can't stand it. And they owe us X amount of dollars. I can't remember what it was, but the bottom line is we got all of our money. It was a lot of money. We had $100,000 in the film, and the deal was that Jeff's side would put up all the money for 50%, and I would get 50% for just making the film. And we made like $350,000. So it got down to the final thing, and we'd gotten all of our money except for like $32,000 of it. And Skip wanted to merge Heritage with the Samuel Goldwyn Company. So he ups and bankrupts himself so that he can absolve himself of all debt so he can make this merger with Sam Goldwyn and not have any outstanding debt. So of course Jeff and I are furious because the man owes us $32,000. He says, well, you know, we're not doing this to rip you guys off. We've got to clean up our act so we can merge it to all the unknown debt we want to get rid of. We're going to give you stock in Samuel Goldwyn's company. We said, okay, fine. So we finally get the stock, but it's only worth $12 grand to each of us. Well, Jeff immediately sells his stock for the $12 grand. I'm adamant. I want my $16,000. I'm not going to sell until that sucker gets to 16. Well, it dropped, and it dropped, and it dropped. It was down to $4 a share, or 4,000 bucks is what it was worth. $4,000. I said, boy, I better get rid of this, or 5 grand. It was 5 grand, and somebody offered me a human shrunken head for $4,500. So I called my broker. I said, sell that stock and give me the money. And I bought a shrunken head with that money. I said, at least that will increase with value. And now I still have that shrunken head. It's in a little dome up in the closet where no one can see it because it does tend to weird people out. But that's how I got my money out of it.
That goes nicely into Carnival stuff. The fact that you've not only got that shrunken head, you have a lot of really weird Carnival things, and you have kept, you know, your hand in Carnival stuff. And here is his book about Carnival's Grind Show. You want to say something about that?
Well, you know, I like movie posters, just like I like pulp magazine covers. I like the artwork that it instills some kind of a feeling that you have to go and see what's inside. You know, like the great movie posters of AIP and stuff in the 50s, those posters would instill you with a feeling like you've got to go see what this is all about. And the sideshows had the same thing with the big paintings. And I was always loved the idea that you could go in there and see a girl turn into a gorilla. Or that you could go in there and see a girl who was born with the body of a spider and the head of a beautiful girl. I mean, how horrible. I mean, and it was just great. And I just loved this stuff. And as I grew older, I became friends with Dave Friedman, who was an old carny himself. And I said, I want to go in the sideshow business. Dave said, no, don't do it. There's no money in sideshow business. Buy iron, which is a ride. I said, well, I don't want to be a ride owner. I want to be a showman. Well, if you must. And he told me some different things to do. And the next thing you knew, I had a show that traveled on this coast. and played in Georgia. It was called Terrors of the Amazon. And I had little mummies and shrunken heads in there, and had some frogs that ate live mice if you threw them in there. Huge giant frogs from South America or someplace like that. But I wasn't having any fun because my stepbrothers ran it and I was never here. So I traded the Amazon trailer with its exhibits to a guy who had a truck that had a giant capybara in it. They called it a swamp rat or something. It was a big rodent. I didn't get the rodent, I just got the truck. So I traded him and they drove the truck out and I put an alligator man mummy in there. And I had the truck repainted to the alligator man. And that wasn't getting so much money, so I knocked out the back of the truck because it had living quarters. It had bunk beds and a refrigerator, and we'd stay in the back of the truck. You could crawl in the back through there. So I knocked out the back past the alligator man. I put some bars in there. And then I put a guy in there with an alligator mask on who'd jump up and scare the shit out of you. That worked. The problem was that the platform was like a tailgate thing that lifted up, and a lot of people would come on there and they'd fall down. Grown people would be falling and slamming that platform, so then I had to get a winch to support it to make sure it didn't collapse. The kids were throwing up with their parents, peeing their pants while their old man held them. Some kids would take off running, and their parents would have to catch them about 100 yards down the midway. So that was working pretty good, and our friend Jeff he had a freak baby show, Babies in Jars. And we partnered up with Jeff, and Jeff his babies were rubber. They were made off of a mold, off of a baby, and he'd put them in a tank and he'd put some instant coffee in there and stir it around, make it brown looking so you couldn't see too good. And he'd put those in there, and he had a freak museum. And we doubled up on the freak museum, and I paid up half the banners, and Jeff paid and had some banners, and I'd bring all my exhibits. I had two-headed thises and five-legged thatses. And we finally went out with Brad. Brad wanted to write a book, so he wanted to talk the front of the show. So we didn't want to put the baby tent up, so we put the babies in with the alligator man, a weird combination. And Brad kept hyping the alligator man and the monster babies. This is the result of when a woman has sex with an alligator, or something like that. We'd just say anything. Anything. If people wouldn't come in, you'd say, if you're scared or pregnant, just keep right on walking. We don't blame you at all. And we'd say, it's weirder than that haircut, stranger than that guy you're with. You know, and we would just say whatever it would do to get these people to come up and go in the show. So now all of a sudden the alligator show, which never made any money for us, is knocking them dead. They're lined up down, and we're over at the museum show where we got a big tent show. We're sitting there and nothing happened. So we went home over the weekend, and I said to Kim, sitting next to her, I said, what are we going to do? We got to do something to make this show work. I said, I got an electric chair gaff. I said, let's build an electric chair. I said, you can be the electric girl. So we went out and we bought a thing, and in the backyard, I'm painting in a hurry because I got to be at the Carnival tonight, and I'm making this electric thing. And I had a blade box, which is where the girl lays in it. She twists her body, and you drop the blades in there, and she contorts herself. So I took that down there. We had a bed of nails, but I didn't ask her to lay on that. And I taught her how to do fire, because we had a stripper in Nightshade who had a fire act, and I watched her a little bit, and I said, well, this isn't too tough. So we made some torches, and I worked myself till I felt like it wasn't bothering me, so then it got Kim going on the fire. And we had a dog that had no hair on his body. We had a Chinese crested that we'd given to a friend of ours, an elephant-skinned dog. So we called the girl and said, can you bring Piggy out to the fair? So now we had the elephant-skinned dog, the rarest dog in the world. It's from Asia. And it's only going to be here for half an hour because she had to go home later. And we would take, and on my answering machine, I would buy little loops of a minute or 30-second loop, like free answer, and I would sit there and record the grind tape at home on the telephone answering machine. You know, you'll see a pygmy mummy, no larger than a football, you know, or whatever you wanted to say. And so then what would happen is there's a circus that was free, and it was down the midway. So every time the circus would let out, Kim went down to Playmates of Hollywood and bought herself a real tiny little outfit. She'd get up on the ticket box where you could see her, and they'd start the spiel. And they called her something because that was the spiel they'd memorized. She was Christine Kelly, the electric girl, the rubber skin girl, and all this sort of stuff. And she would stand there, and they would stop the whole crowd from the circus. I mean, we have photos of people just stretched out. And then they would all come inside after a spiel, and Kim would come out, and she would do the electric act, which was basically, anyway, if you got near her, when she was on this box, a light bulb would start to light. Just as soon as it got near her, it would start lighting up, and if you touched her, it would make the sizzling sound. It would go full glow if she touched it. And God help you if she touched you.
Yeah.
I put my hand on this thing, and once it's on, you don't know if it's on or not. And I said to the person, I said, I can't tell if this thing's working or not. I said, come here,
and they touched my watch, it knocked them about 3 feet back on their butt. I said, and it shocked me too. And she had, so she would do this, and then you would take the torch, and you put the torch to her finger, and it would light. A spark would jump from her finger to the torch, and would light the torch. Then you turn the box off, give her the other torch with the lower density flame material, and she would go to that flame, and then like do her legs and her arms, and then she would do the blade box, and they'd ding them a quarter to come up and look down in the box and see how she happened to be in there, and kids would try to cop a cheap feel real quick because she was pretty.
We don't even ding a month, Mike.
Yeah, Kim, when I was walking you back to your trailer, I remember telling you that it was obvious that Fred really liked you because he was shooting he was shooting electricity through you and setting you on fire, and that's how you knew he really liked you.
Well, the bottom line of it is that we started doing a little bit better business.
Yeah.
And I love this type of show so much. I did do a book on the sideshows, and I'm not pushing this. Brad is pushing this. I didn't even bring any of these with me, but it's just because I love this stuff. It's got all the photos of the artwork. My favorite is the headless woman illusion. Down at the bottom it says the headless girl patiently waits for the next show to begin. And it's an overview. It has stuff on the terrace. This is the show. The giant rat show is the one that I turned into the alligator man. And this is Malcolm Gary, who was a crazed sideshow carny. And there is no money in the sideshow, but we certainly did have a real good time.
I learned to say quinto centavos. That helped a lot.
Oh, niños diablo, niños con dos cabezas, baby with 2 heads.
I also
the victims of a tragic addiction.
I also remember they started out to be twins, but something went wrong, terribly wrong.
We used to call
the Alligator Man, and the Monster
we used to say Muppet Baby. And people who wanted, our friends would come out. Karen Black would come out and do the spiel. Forey came out to the fair and saw us one year. Gary Graver, my DP, he was the best. He was the best. And if business would slow down, Jillian and we'd go up there, pay our ticket, take our own ticket. We'd go up there and she'd look down and I'd touch her and she'd scream and start hitting me and yelling at me. And that would bring about 10 people to the box office. And you send a girl up there, a shill, stick, whatever you want to call them. They go up there, look down, and scream, or they overreact or whatever, and then we'd walk out in the midway, circle back around, and wait and see if the business died off. We'd go back and we'd do that all night. Go up there and scream and look in, and I did. They were doing a documentary one time, and I was the alligator man. Nobody wants to be alligator man. You wear this mask and this thing, and you got to wait down there, and when you see them, and they look down at the mummy, and they're looking at it, you come up and you hit the bar with your hand, and it scares them. Well, I didn't want to take this giant tire out of there, which is where we stored the spares. I jumped up and I ran my toe into that tire. I eventually lost my nail, but the bad thing was that I came down out of there. I can't even say what I was saying. And I looked over, and this video crew was on me.
Alligator Man is scary. Listen to the terrible things he says.
Yeah, not for children.
Well, speaking of children, I learned one thing about the carnival. These carny kids are wonderful because they would help me keep the business going. Alligator Man, the Monster Babies, being, the shills. They'd go up there and start screaming. I mean, I'd ask them, it's like if there was no action, I'd say, please go up there and act like you're really scared and make a lot of noise. And in a few minutes, we get a crowd. I mean, there's nothing better than a screaming kid, to get people to come check it out,
People would give you more than you ever needed. A woman came out of the baby show and grabbed the ticket box, leaned over and threw up. Right in front of the show. Business went up 50%. We couldn't have paid for that kind of publicity. But it's a very hard hobby to have because you are always open. That's why they call them grind shows. They never close. The exhibit is always open. And on our biggest week would be an 11-day spot. We do it around Easter. On Easter Sunday, well, it would open at 11 a.m. It wouldn't close till midnight that night. Yeah. Now you're talking about standing out there, tearing tickets in half for 50 cents a head, of which the carnival gets half of that. So you're really getting a quarter a head. And you're doing that for 12 to 13 hours. Now that's slough night. They're going to move. They've got 2 days or 3 days to get to their next spot. You've got 2 or 3 hours to get the hell out. Because we don't travel with them. So that would mean that at midnight, you would have to take your show down, pack it up, and drive it off the lot. Now, my show was great. 20 minutes, I'd be down. You fold the things back, you drop the thing there, you know, you take the steps and you put them in the thing, you take the rails down, and I mean within 20 minutes. And Jeff, who had the baby show, would always go, let me give you a hand with those steps, Fred. And I was like, I don't need any help, Jeff. I'm strong, I can pull it. No, let me give you a hand with that. Well, you knew I was leading up to it. You look over, his tent takes about half a block worth of space. He's over there by himself. So you know what's going to happen. You're going to go over there and you're going to help him take that tent down. And I was trying to impress Kimmy there, so I took a sledgehammer. And I was out there at 2 a.m. in the morning after a couple beers, and I'm hitting those stakes. And I went around, and it just, you have to pound them to loosen them, and then you have to pull them out. And they weigh a ton, and I went around and knocked every tent stake out of there.
No, only 80%. It was so great that Jeff, his son, and I stood around marveling at your heroism and courage. It's like Jeff's going, look, Fred's going for another one. And Jeff's son says, yeah, it looks like he's going to do the next one after that. And I'm standing there, he's sure taking those out, you know. we're drinking the beer too.
And you have to walk the tent down, you have to walk the pole down and get out of the way as the tent falls out from underneath you as you go to the other side. And then, of course, you have to put all the two-headed babies and stuff away.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be too cavalier handling those.
That was work, yeah. Well, look, everybody, I appreciate you coming. I'm sorry about my being a little late getting started. I do want to say one thing to prove there's a carnival atmosphere here. $6 a copy for Fred's book, $6 a copy for Fred's book. Thank you for coming.